One alternative source of either negatives or imagery for photography is the use of pinhole cameras. The history of the pinhole camera is as long as the history of photography. The pinhole camera or the camera obscura formed the basis of the birth of photography. There are plenty of options with pinhole cameras. You can buy commercially made pinhole cameras. They're often made out of either wood or cardboard, sometimes plastic, as you see examples here. You can make your own pinhole camera. Basically, you need anything that you can get completely dark and put a lens on one end. That lens could simply be a piece of tape or aluminum foil, as long as it blocks light and it allows you to give a pinpoint size hole, hence pinhole camera. Here you can see a few examples of somebody making in the upper right a pinhole camera simply out of a cardboard box. Notice they've reinforced edges with electrical tape. This is probably the lens cap over their lens, which is again probably just a simple hole. Here's someone it looks like has taken a cinder block. It must have had a hole drilled in there that would go through, but indeed there's the shutter. Just move that. There would be an opening and then a place to put film or light sensitive material on the other side. Here's someone that's made it out of wood, or you can see someone's taken their coffee pot and turned that into a pinhole camera, and there you can see the lens. The idea of the pinhole camera is that if you convert a box or a room, get it completely dark, and then open that room to light via a lens, which can simply be a hole. If you sit in a camera obscura room that's done this way, for example, it takes a few minutes for your eyes to adjust, but after about 5 minutes or so, if you're sitting inside essentially a pinhole camera, you can see an image all around you. It's upside down and backwards, but indeed, they're pretty spectacular. The Legacy Project is a group of photographers. I'll let you read the names here. In Southern California, they converted an abandoned F-18 jet hangar that was about 3 stories high and created the world's largest photograph. Here you can see them and a group of assistants as they're hanging this 31-foot high muslin by 111 feet. They will soak that in a light sensitive chemical, and they will hang it from the ceiling here. And you can see essentially what they did is they took on one of the walls in the building. So they sealed the building so it would get completely dark, and then probably drilled a hole in the door or one of the walls. I read that the opening was less than a 1/4 inch diameter. Light travels in a straight line unless it's reflected. So when light comes through a hole or an opening in the wall, the light from the sky would come in a straight line through that opening, and if it follows that straight line, would end up on the floor, and the light reflecting off the parking lot outside the building, traveling in a straight line through that hole or opening in the wall, would end up on the ceiling. Hence, everything that you're going to see in this is upside down and backwards, sort of like the inside of your camera. Anyway, this is the muslin that's being exposed, as you can see. And there you can see the guys that initiated the project here standing in front of the pinhole camera image. And so they took that muslin and exposed and developed it, which created the largest black and white negative that you see here. And then I wanted to show you quickly how that was displayed in a gallery or museum setting. Be kind of profound experience. Well, another photographer that uses the pinhole camera is Joe Babcock. We had Joe in Chico, at least a decade ago. He was having a show at Butte College. Joe is a former classmate of mine at San Francisco Art Institute, where we were undergraduate students together. Here you can see an image Joe created for one of his exhibitions, 1,000 Cameras by Joe Babcock. All of the cans and boxes and everything you see behind, other than the shelves, he turned into cameras. Essentially made them light tight. Sometimes that means simply creating good seals, or sometimes it means putting black plastic or electrical tape on the inside of the boxes to make them light tight. But Joe takes those cameras and makes images with them. So he took a can of paint here, a gallon can of paint, and used that as a pinhole camera and created the negative of somebody on scaffolding painting a house. Or he took this photograph with a coffee can with a famous Ansel Adams photograph printed on the coffee can. This was an ad campaign back in the 1970s. And indeed, the Ansel Adams photograph is of Yosemite Valley, and you can see that Babcock used the camera with the image of Yosemite Valley to make a negative of Yosemite Valley from almost the same vantage point. Or his picture of a log cabin from maple syrup. Or a picture of a worker at work through a lunchbox. Or a statue of a soldier made from an ammunitions box. Or all of these suitcases were turned into pinhole cameras. Yes, even before Ian Ruther, there were people that turned their cars into portable pinhole cameras. Here you can see Joe did that with his VW van. And then some of the large-scale negatives that he made with that. And here he's directly using color photographic paper made to make prints from color negatives. So when he starts with a positive, he ends up with a negative. Barbara S. is a New York photographer. She was born in 1948. She's best known for her photographs of pinhole camera, although she's also an accomplished musician and has performed and recorded music since the late 1970s. Her images are intentionally vague and unresolved. They initiate a range of emotions, from dreams, sometimes anxiety or helplessness. They captivate fantasies. They're romantic in nature, meaning romantic art favors imagination and emotion over reason and intellect. Of her intent as a photographer, S. was quoted as saying, "In a way, I try to photograph what cannot be photographed." She's taught at Bard College in New York since 1997. Here's a particularly beautiful and evocative image made with color photographic materials. Ruth Thorne-Thomsen was born in New York City in 1943. She resides in Philadelphia. Something I didn't know until just the other day. She was married to photographer Ray K. Metzger until he passed away in 2014. Thorne-Thomsen studied at Columbia College in Chicago in the early 1970s and at the School of the Institute of Chicago in the mid-1970s. From 1975 to about the mid-1990s, Thorne-Thomsen produced an unorthodox body of photographs using a pinhole camera. She staged toys and other props to create seemingly vast landscapes. Sometimes these include her own cutout photographs in some compositions, and they create whimsical riffs sometimes on art history. Most of her prints are relatively small, 4 by 5 inches. They're often presented informally with uneven edges and other markers that they're simply produced. Her works are rooted in the 19th century travel views by photographers such as Maxime Duchamp and Francis Frith. And her use of the soft focus is reminiscent of the pictorialist photographs of the teens and 20s. Her works playfully blend both fantasy and reality. Scale is deceptive in her works. She often plays on that fine line between photographic reality and illusion. Another interesting use of the pinhole camera is this camera made by Mick Farrell and Cliff Haynes, two British artists who constructed this camera. If you look closely, you can see that it's made out of thousands of drinking straws. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think eventually they switched to metal straws. But each straw is essentially a pinhole camera lens. Combined, they created interesting images like these portraits. It's interesting how they mimic digital photography.